Next question that we are going to solve is basically it has a global question as well. Okay, so we have all learned about global questions. Definition is that global question tests how well you understand the main theme of the whole passage by asking about the writer's purpose, suitable title, or the main idea. Sometimes the passage does not have a title or subheading if there is a global multiple choice question. As you can see in the exercise question, that they do not have a heading, and they do not want to give that heading because they want to know your understanding as to how well you can get the topic or the main idea or the main theme of the passage. So they do not give a title or heading, but that is sometimes, and especially if there is a MCQ question. Now, strategies is to identify the main idea of every paragraph. That way you can build a bigger picture as to what this passage will be talking about. String them together to get the main idea or theme of the whole passage. That is what I said in the first point. If the question is about the writer's tone, pay attention to the tone as you read. That is also a very important, like which way is the writer talking? Is the writer positive, negative, or neutral about the topic under study? So let's dive into a practice exercise. Here, I think it is important for us to read all the paras, but what we will do is we will skim it pretty quickly. Europeans tend to be skeptical about the consumption of genetically modified foods. Okay, so it's talking about genetically modified foods, and there is strong consumer pressure supported by the Green parties to ban farmers from growing GM genetically modified crops in European Union. So again, they're talking about EU. It is because I'm letting you understand this. Okay, do not make deep notes about it. It's talking about genetically modified crops. Genetically modified crops, and the green parties are against it. The green parties of what? Of the European Union. And let's read ahead. However, 5.5 million farmers worldwide, now they are talking about not just Europe, they're talking about worldwide, mainly in the US, Argentina, Canada, and China, now grow GM crops covering more than 50 million hectares, an area the size of Spain. So they're saying, now you do not have to understand it in detail, but just to let you know how to read through it, do not make detailed notes, just read it, underline and highlight whatever word you think would give you or help you out to get the main idea. Other Asian countries such as India are enthusiastic, and Indonesia is about to join the GM club. So despite the Europeans, GM crop growth is increasing globally. So this paragraph gives us a contrasting view of opinion of Europe on GM crop versus worldwide. So they said in the last line that, so despite the Europeans, GM crops growth is increasing globally. So however it may be opposed in Europe, the world out there is accepting it. A recent British scientist report emphasizes that inserting genes, so a British scientist is talking about inserting genes into plants, is still a very intact science. So unexpected biochemical side effects are possible. So here it's talking about side effects of inserting genes into plants affecting foodstuffs and human consumers. Legally, genetically modified companies have to demonstrate their crops are substantially equivalent to the original. So here they are talking about the comparison between genetically modified crops to the original kind of naturally occurring crops. Are they substantially equivalent or not? And who have to prove that? The GM companies. But what does this mean? That they should contain the same nutrients, or that they should look or smell similar. So should it contain the same nutrients, or should it be physically of similar nature? Scientists who not long ago dismissed public concerns as hysteria are now concurring with green consumers activists and advising tougher regulation. So what are scientists now doing? They are asking for a tougher regulation over genetically modified crops. So this is where they talked a little bit about this is where they talk a little bit about scientific side of the um, uh, genetically modified crops. You do not have to read it like a chapter of your what do you call it, a chapter of your syllabus. You just have to read the line. I'm saying these things so that you understand how to evaluate such question. More consensus and definition is required on this controversial topic. So this is a controversial topic, and they need more clarity on it, not just some vague statements. Currently, now they are talking about the present scenario. It seems that most American consumers trust the genetically modified food producers and associated big businesses, while Europeans do not. Again, so Europeans are absolutely against genetically modified crops, and who all are in favor? Americans. Canadians are skeptical. Their studies of cross pollinated super strains indicate problems such as potential supervirus. So, Canadians are also not with them. Canadians. Dutch studies, however, suggest that engineered sugar beet is friendlier to wildlife, less damaging to environment. It needs less herbicides for the same yield, allowing more wheat biomass and increased insects and spiders, which in turn feed increased bird life. These results are significant, as European law states that GM crops may be banned if they can be proved to damage the environment. So now Dutch are Dutch showed a study which was pro GM crops. However, US said they'll completely ban it if it shows some environmental damage. Attitudes to GM crops appear to depend on where one lives. So, yes, obviously, I can state from these country analysis that if I'm living in America, I'm in pro with this, pro choice GM, and then Dutch, then I like GM. But if I'm in Europe and Canada, then I don't like GM. So, it depends on where one lives and what one does. Cotton farmers in South Africa are very enthusiastic. So, South African cotton farmers are enthusiastic as their first GM cotton crop proved extremely successful, boosting yields to 50 to 90%. BT cotton contains a gene of a bacterial toxin that kills the major pest, bollworms, and reduces the need for pesticide. Growing GM cotton requires less labor time, an important factor in a region ravaged by HIV/AIDS. BT cotton yield shows increases of up to 129%. Unsurprisingly, use grew from only 0.1% to farmers in 1997-1998 to over 90% by 2000-2001. Opponents of GM crops claim that pests will develop resistance soon and that small farmers relying completely on the modified strain are particularly vulnerable to changes in market conditions. So this is the disadvantage to talk about. Moreover, here they give a statistic of how well it worked for South African cotton crops. India, our country, is also pleased with its high relative yields of GM cotton, and generally yield increases in developing world are turning out to be much higher than those of the first world. It is understandable, therefore, that developing countries are keen to embrace GM foods and farming methods, while as many Western farmers and consumers remain skeptical. So there they are making a comparison between developed nation and developing nation, that these developing nations are more towards GM crops. Now, paragraph number F. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, the government leaflet GM Food Newsletter is annoying consumer activists and environmentalists. In the leaflet, a university biotechnology student explains to her mother that all GM foods are safety assessed and are as safe as their conventional counterparts. The Food and Environmental Hygiene Department says it was published with a view to enhance the knowledge of the public on GM food. Greenpeace call it balanced pro-GM food propaganda. However, in claim the government is pushing GM food safety whilst at the same time understanding the potential risks. It adds government's role is to educate and inform the public, not to bluntly promote what is unproven technology. Greenpeace do not believe that a reasonable system of pre-market safety assessment exists in Hong Kong and have been actively campaigning for the compulsory labeling of GM ingredients. The government argues that the assessment is adequate enough to allay public fears and the labeling of GM food should be voluntary. Park and Shop and Welcome allow distribution of the GM newsletter, but a spokeswoman said that this did not necessarily imply active approval of GM foods, adding they had previously helped the government deliver a series of educational leaflet posters and information on SARS and dengue fever. Our policy on GM food is neutral, she said. Now, out of all these headings, which heading do you think is the most appropriate after finding out and reading the whole passage more or less in detail? Environmentalist reaction? No. Differing yields in developing and first worlds? Could be, but I don't know. Increased yield in BT cotton? No. The whole paragraph does not speak about BT cotton. It's more for GM crops. Hong Kong government's marketing of GM foods. It does not only talks of Hong Kong. Legal implication is too vague of a this thing. Reaction to GM cotton. The whole para is not talking about GM cotton. Growing importance of GM foods could be. GM crops and viruses could be, but it's just mentioned in one para. Attitude worldwide to GM food, most appropriate up till now. Supermarkets policy is not talking about a particular supermarket. I am confused on this, and this. Out of these three, I personally find this particular heading to be the most appropriate one. I'm giving you a time of 2 minutes, not 2 minutes, 1 minute. On the basis of what you have read till now, what do you think is the most appropriate answer? Okay, so the thing is that I actually read it wrong. I understood it that it would be for the whole passage. It's not. There are 10 questions, like 10 options, sorry. Out of these 10 options, uh, you actually have to like mark which particular paragraphs it would suit the most. So there are in total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 paras, and there are 10 options. Out of these 10, 2 will not be used. Now you have read all the paragraphs. Which all paragraphs starting from A to H would you think? Which all headings would choose? Which all headings would fit the paragraphs from A to H? So you do that question. Until that, we'll read the global question. What is the global question? I don't know why the global question was not written in here, but I'm sorry, there's a lot of confusion in this question. I think it was cut copy while pasting this question. There was certain confusion. I think this question is incomplete. The global question here, however, I'll write it on my own. Okay, so the global question is, which one of the following is the most suitable title for the reading passage? So I have to write the most suitable title for the whole passage. This is the global question because they give you to write the whole passage, and they do not give a title, therefore, because they want to test you. So they don't give a title or subheading, and especially if it's a multiple choice question. So this indeed is an MCQ question. The first option is damage to the environment because of GM crops and foods. This is your first option. Second option is GM foods creating annoyance among consumer activists and environmentalist. C is divided opinion over GM crops and foods. D is how GM foods are ruling the consumer market. Now, you have read all the 8 paragraphs. What do you think would be an appropriate heading for the whole passage? I'm not talking about the paragraphs individually. I'm talking about the whole passage. Would it be damage to the environment because of GM crops and food? Yes, it could be. Divided opinion over GM crops and foods? Yes, there is divided opinion as well. how GM foods are ruling the consumer market. How is it ruling? I don't think so that it's talking just about how it's ruling. GM food creating annoyance among consumer activists and environmentalists. So no, it's not just talking about only consumer activists. Also had some. Uh, the tone overall was neutral, because where one way the author was talking about some positive of GM crops, the other way it was also neutralizing it by talking it in a negative sense also. So it was in overall a neutral style. So these talk about a certain one opinion. Like it's talking just about the environmentalists? No. Is it just talking about how it's ruling? No. He gave both the opinions. He gave logic to both the parties who were pro and who were against it. So the correct option among all it, because even if you talk about A option, damage to the environment because of GM crops and food. So yes, it talked about damage, but does it talk about damage all throughout the paragraphs? No, not just about environment. They also talked about health issues related to humans. Okay, if we are talking GM's crop and its negative impact, they also talked about humans' health, and they also talked about positivity also, not just the impact and impact. All 8 paragraphs were not on about it. So the correct option is divided opinion over GM crops and food. This is the most appropriate one, because, as I said, the general tone of the author over the whole paragraphs, over all the paragraphs, were mixed reaction. Like he was talking about in certain paragraphs positive effects and negative effects also. So once you have identified the main idea of every paragraph as above, you string them together to get the main idea and theme of the whole passage. That is what we learn here in the strategies. In this case, after understanding the main idea and theme, the most suitable title for the reading passage is option C. As option A, B, and D are either one of the ideas or a part of the topic. They are not talking about the whole topic. So the correct option is C. Now moving on to the first paragraph, we have, this is our options. This is out of these 10, we have to mark 8 correct options in front of the individual paragraphs, whichever will suit the most. So let's see the first para. Okay, so we understood here that it was talking about Europe, it was talking about worldwide as well, it was talking about GM crops in general. So which para do you think would suit, which heading would you think, which heading do you think would suit the most for the first paragraph? Was it talking about environmental reactions? No. Differing yields in developing and first worlds? No. Increased yield in BD cotton? No. Hong Kong government? No. Legal implication? No. Reaction to GM crops? No. Growing importance of GM food? Yes. Here they are talking about growing importance of GM food. They said even though Europe is not there ready to get a part of it, but all these other countries are about to or have joined the GM club. So despite the Europeans, GM crop growth is increasing globally. So that is what my heading says, that growing importance of GM food. Next is this paragraph. British scientists inserting genes, unexpected biochemical side effects. Companies have to demonstrate substantial equivalent to the original ones. Public concerns were dismissed, but now even they are looking for tougher regulations. So which heading do you think would suit the most? Attitudes worldwide to GM food, or supermarkets policy, or GM crops or virus, or which one do you think would suit the most? Legal implications. Why? Because in all, in this whole second paragraph, they're talking about the legal implications of what would happen if these things are not taken with seriousness. So they're talking about tougher regulations. They're talking about substantial equivalency to the original ones, right? They're talking about scientific studies and all. So legal implications. Now third para was about where it is, yes, it's talking about environmental damage. Okay, environmental damage. अमेरिकन कंज्यूमर जीएम फूड प्रोड्यूसर्स पर ट्रस्ट करते हैं, यूरोपियन नहीं करते, कैनेडियंस भी नहीं करते, डच करते हैं, साउथ अफ्रीकन्स करते हैं, बट these results are significant as European law states that GM crop may be banned if they can be proven to damage the environmental conditions. Now, which heading do you think would suit the most? Environmentalist reaction? No. Increase in yield, Hong Kong bhi nahi. Reaction to GM cotton? No, it's not talking about GM. No. Attitudes worldwide to GM food? Yes. It's talking about the attitude of worldwide people towards the genetically modified food. Next paragraph. Next para is about, see, now attitudes to GM crop appear to depend on where one lives. You might get confused with this line, but here they are talking about what? Here they are talking about, very important line, GM cotton, BT cotton, but mainly about the genetically modified cotton. So my answer here would be without a doubt reactions to GM cotton. Why? Let's justify it. Because they're talking about BT cotton by South African people. However, they have opinions. Opponents of GM crops claim that pests will develop resistance. Smaller farmers relying will have modified strains, and over 90% by, okay, this is about something else, but it's talking about GM cotton. Then India is also pleased. It's talking about developed, underdeveloped countries. So the very second heading, differing yields in developing and first worlds. What do you mean by first worlds and developing worlds? First world simply means the developed and underdeveloped countries. First world, therefore developing countries. This is not, we are not just looking for the keywords here, darling, but we are looking for something higher than that, a bigger picture we are looking at. So it's not just about one paragraph. Then paragraph number F. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, the government leaflets GM food. Now the word Hong Kong has appeared. You have read this paragraph completely. Which heading do you think would be the most appropriate one? For paragraph F. Hong Kong government's marketing of GM food. The whole para is about the marketing of GM food newsletter, consumer activists, environmentalists, GM foods, as this, as that, the food and environmental department, public on GM food. So it's talking all in all about the marketing of GM food through this newsletter. Greenpeace call it blatant. What do you think would be the heading for G? Yes, environmentalist reaction. The Greenpeace is basically, I think, an agency where they are talking about how they are against pro GM food propaganda, and they think that they are against pro GM food propaganda, and they think that the government is not taking corrective measures. So it's talking about the where is it? Environmentalist reaction towards GM food. Now there is one para left, and you are left with three options. Read this H paragraph. Tell me, I'm going to give you 1 minute of time. Which heading would be the most appropriate one? It says that Park and Shop and Welcome allow distribution of GM newsletter, but a spokeswoman said that it's not necessarily imply active approval towards the GM food, adding they had previously helped the government. Now it says they have previously helped the government. What do you mean by they? Who are they here? Just Park and Shop and Welcome. Of education, leaflet, poster, and information on SARS, dengue fever. Our policy on GM food is neutral, she said. Again, at the ending, they said neutral. Even this particular person the spokeswoman was also saying neutral as per the author's tone also. Similar to the author's tone also. So, is it about increasing yields of BT cotton? No, completely cut kar do. Is it about GM crop and viruses? Now, looking at this, someone would get confused. But ये क्या कह रहे हैं इस लाइन में? They are saying कि इन्होंने they had previously helped the government. इन्होंने पहले भी गवर्नमेंट की हेल्प करी है. क्या करने में? Delivering a series of education, leaflet, poster and information. ये लोग क्या करते हैं? लीफलेट या पोस्टर या किसी भी तरह की एजुकेशन इंफॉर्मेशन डिलीवर करवाते हैं पहले भी करवा चुके हैं। किसके बारे में? सार्स और डेंगू फीवर के बारे में। बट ऐसे ज़रूरी नहीं है कि जो ये कह रहे हैं दे, मतलब जो दे कह रहे हैं वो ज़रूरी नहीं कि सच हो। दे जस्ट हेल्प द गवर्नमेंट। सो दे, ये जो वायरस का एग्जाम्पल है, इट्स नॉट एट ऑल रिलेटेड टू GM क्रॉप्स, सो दिस इज नॉट द आंसर. So this is how you eliminated the wrong answer, because you read the paragraph with concentration, not necessarily making such detailed notes, but you understood it, right? So it's about supermarket policy. जो यहाँ दे की बात हो रही है, this day is what? Park and shop welcome. What are these? These are supermarkets, and they have this policy of helping out the government with various policies where they work according to the government. So this is how you solve the questions. These are the answer keys for the given question. If you want to solve such questions with me, or you just want to have such types of questions to solve, comment down below and I'll provide you with this. I put in a lot of effort to make these videos. Please subscribe to my channel. This is actually my request, because all of this concept and teachings are actually paid teachings. Institute out there take 10,000 minimum and they teach you this stuff. I'm teaching it to you for free, and the subscription is there for free. So the least you can do is just like